The seas are a truly dangerous place, and sadly every year it is inevitable that a small number of ships and aircraft are lost whilst traversing them. But there are certain areas of open water that seem to claim more than their fair share of souls, providing no explanation for these disappearances. This week we visit one such region, the Great Lakes Triangle, but first, a shout out to this episode's sponsor, Audible. Audible is the world's largest online resource for audiobooks, with hundreds of thousands of titles on offer. When I'm walking the dog, doing household chores, or even editing videos like this one, nothing takes me out of the monotony more than listening to a good audiobook. This week I've been listening to Imperium by Robert Harris, the first part of his excellent Marcus Cicero trilogy, telling the story of how a low-born lawyer rises to become the most powerful man in Rome, detailing his various run-ins with Julius Caesar and Pompey along the way. It is a masterclass of storytelling, one I try to read at least once every couple of years. The political wrangling, corruption and outright betrayal make for a hugely interesting story, all based on true events, and brought to life through Audible by the excellent narration of Bill Wallace. I'd recommend it to anyone with an interest in ancient Rome, and what better way to start than with an Audible subscription? Head over to audible.com/bedtime stories and sign up for a free 30-day trial. You'll get a free audiobook to start off your collection, and another free book if you have Amazon Prime. Audible members will get one free book a month thereafter, and up to an 80% discount on selected titles, plus unlimited access to Audible original podcasts. The wind blowing in from the heart of the bay was icy cold, chilling the sailors as they hastened to ready their ships for departure. From his elevated position further along the docks, Colonel Roussel watched on as the distant figures hurried across the decks of the vessels, stowing away supplies and equipment in preparation for the long journey that lay ahead of them. Even with the heavy military-issue greatcoat that he was wearing, he still felt bitterly cold and pitied the men he was observing, who had no such protection from the elements. Winter on Lake Superior could be unrelentingly harsh, which was potentially one of the reasons why the visitors seemed so eager to depart. The weather reports for the coming week were particularly ominous, with the meteorologists forecasting severe gales. Roussel had called the captains of the 3 ships to his office the previous evening to inform them of this, strongly suggesting that they delay their departure until the danger had passed, but they had stubbornly refused. The ships were minesweepers, constructed in Fort William for the French Navy, and intended to clear German mines from the English Channel. They were not pretty, but were of a sturdy design, with steel-framed hulls surrounding watertight compartments. All 3 were named after great French victories, Inkerman, Sebastopol and Sarasols. The Canadian officer sighed and pulled his coat a little tighter, as the first of the minesweepers moved away from the dock. He understood how vital these ships were to the war effort, and that their crews would be desperate to return home after such a long period away from their loved ones. But if it had been within his power, he would have refused them permission to leave. Roussel had been born and raised in Thunder Bay, and like many of the locals, he joked that the icy waters there flowed through his veins. He had seen the crews of too many ships depart and never return, been to too many funerals where the caskets were weighed down with ballast as there was no body to place inside them. There was something dark about the great body of water that surrounded Ontario, something malevolent that seemed to wade out of sight, striking when the sailors who were traversing it lowered their guard or made a mistake. It was dangerous enough traveling these waters for the men who had done so for generations, let alone those of a foreign navy. The last ship swung free from her berth, signaling a farewell blast with her horn, which the colonel answered with a salute. Over the coming days, as he went about his duties, he continued to worry about the French vessels and their crews, and in time, Roussel's worst fears would be confirmed, as neither Inkerman nor Sarasols would ever be seen again. It is far from unusual for an area in which people regularly disappear without a trace to be referred to as a triangle. The use of 3 fixed reference points to define the boundaries of any such region is sadly all too common, and the names of these mysterious expanses carry with them haunting connotations, names such as Bermuda, Alaska and Bennington. In the case of the Great Lakes Triangle, which also encompasses both the Michigan and Marysburg Vortex Triangles, the loose borders of the region are defined by the cities of Winnipeg, Louisville, and Burlington. We have already explored the tragic loss of several ships on the Great Lakes in previous episodes, but in truth, we have barely scratched the surface. The Michigan Triangle in particular has the highest concentration of unexplained disappearances in the entire region. The legend of the larger Great Lakes Triangle can be traced back as far as October of 1892, when 3 vessels were lost that month under mysterious circumstances. Then on the 21st of November, 1902, the SS Bannockburn was sighted by another ship entering a fog bank near Isle Royale. The freighter and the 20 men who had set sail with her were never seen again. 16 years later, a trio of newly constructed French minesweepers were heading towards Sioux Locks on their way to the Atlantic Ocean. As bad weather set in, the Sebastopol became separated from her sister ships, the Inkerman and the Sarasols. The latter 2 vessels and the 78 men aboard them never passed through the locks, and the remains of either ship have never been found. But it is not always the unexplained loss of a ship or aircraft that leads people to wonder if there is something unseen and deadly at play upon the Great Lakes. Sometimes it is the discovery of a ship, and the condition that it has been left in, that can raise questions over and beyond its mere disappearance. The most famous example of this is the Roosevelt, a 2-masted schooner which was constructed in the 1860s to transfer goods between Benton Harbor and Milwaukee. Her crew of 11 sailors had spent most of their working lives traveling back and forth along the same route, but would make their final journey in the winter of 1921. On the morning of October 31st, she was found floating upside down by a steamer approaching Milwaukee. When the vessel was recovered and inspected by the Coast Guard, it was found that there was no trace of the captain or his crew. It was initially suggested she may have been involved in a collision with a larger ship, but none had been reported in the vicinity at the time. And there was no damage found anywhere on her hull to support this theory. Another proposal is that she may have sprung a leak, and eventually capsized. Again, a close inspection of her exterior was carried out, and it was found to be in pristine condition, with no apparent flaws or leaks. The loss of the Roosevelt's crew remains one of the region's most enduring mysteries, as if someone or something simply plucked her from the water and turned her upside down. An even more perplexing incident would take place 16 years later, involving a ship named the O.M. McFarland. On the evening of April 28, 1937, the freighter was attempting to negotiate the locks leading into Lake Michigan. There was a significant number of ice floes on the water at the time, and the crew were taking extra care to avoid a potential collision. The captain of the McFarland was George Donner, a veteran sailor who was highly respected by his crew. He had spent several hours on the ship's bridge, refusing to rest until he was certain that any possible danger had passed. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, he was satisfied that he and his men were now safe, and retired to the comfort of his cabin. As he left the bridge, Donner had asked that the second mate wake him when they neared Port Washington. Several hours later, the man had made his way to the captain's cabin, but was unable to elicit any response from inside. More crewmen were called for, and the door was forced open, revealing an empty room. The men were mystified, finding that the door had been secured from inside with a key. Despite it being completely vacant, the captain's bed was still made, showing no sign that he had slept in it, and his pipe lay on a table nearby. There were no signs of a struggle, and no other means of exiting the room besides the single door. It was as if the officer had simply faded out of existence. Equally as baffling is the loss of a Douglas DC-4 prop liner over Lake Michigan during the of 1950. The aircraft had been designated as Northwest Airlines Flight 2501, and had been carrying 58 people from New York City to Seattle. At approximately 1:15 in the morning, the pilot had contacted local flight controllers, asking for permission to descend to 2,500 feet due to deteriorating weather conditions. This was the last radio contact with the plane, which subsequently failed to answer any further transmissions. A massive land and air search was immediately carried out, for the remains of the aircraft and the unfortunate souls who had been on board at the time. A small number of items were recovered, which were believed to have come from the missing plane, but the wreckage of the aircraft itself has never been found. The loss of the DC-4 and its crew remains one of the worst air disasters in American history. Author Clive Cussler, who is famous for his love of nautical mysteries, continues to fund efforts to locate the missing plane. His team have now searched in excess of 500 square miles of lakebed, locating 10 previously unknown shipwrecks, but no trace of the missing airliner. Several witnesses came forward in the days after the incident, stating that they had seen strange lights hovering above the lake, at the same time that contact was lost with Flight 2501. Perhaps the most disturbing of these came from two local police officers, who followed a mysterious red light which they could not identify, and was traveling at speed over the water. Sightings of UFOs have been reported over the Great Lakes for decades, the most notable of which took place in 1994, when local residents flooded the police switchboard to report hundreds of ghostly lights traveling slowly over Lake Michigan. A UFO is also believed to be responsible for the loss of two Air Force pilots, scrambled to investigate its presence over Lake Superior in 1953. But some commentators claim that it may be visitors from beneath the lake, rather than above it, that are being observed by the witnesses involved. In December of 2018, a father and son from Ohio observed a large cylindrical object hovering over Lake Erie, repeatedly entering and then re-emerging from the waters below. It is theorized that visitors to our world may have previously established homes underneath the Earth's waters, emerging on occasion to study humanity. For decades, U.S. submarines have reported contact with fast-moving and highly maneuverable vessels of an unknown origin. Could it be that the Great Lakes play host to just such a population of otherworldly beings? Beyond theories of alien visitors, be they from above or below the waves, there are other ideas as to what may be happening to the missing vessels within the Great Lakes Triangle. Some believe that the region occupies a point of weakness between our dimension and a number of neighboring ones, as do the other notorious triangles found across the globe. It is theorized that there are places where some degree of leakage takes place, where objects and individuals can unwittingly pass between two realities, sometimes surviving to tell the tale. The reason there is such a lack of evidence for these disappearances is because the wreckage that investigators seek is not on the lake bed, but instead in a parallel reality. Is it possible that the unfortunate victims of these incidents have simply vanished from the face of the earth, only to reappear in a different reality altogether? Did the fog bank which the Bannockburn entered somehow transport it to another universe? Did Captain Donner tragically pass from our reality into another as he entered his cabin? In 2007, divers discovered a mysterious ring of standing stones located beneath Lake Michigan. These constructions are laid out in a manner similar to the Stonehenge site located in England. It is unknown how they came to be constructed there, as they are not a natural formation, and it is believed they may date back as far as 10,000 years. Naturally, the inability to explain how these stones came to be on the lake bed has attracted all manner of unfounded explanations. It has been suggested that they may be a time portal or some form of gateway to another reality. Their presence, though, is another similarity shared with comparable structures found within the bounds of the Bermuda Triangle. A more rational explanation can be found in an unusual weather phenomenon which has been observed at certain locations throughout the region. A microburst is a sudden and localized weather front where precipitation and wind can affect a location as small as a mile in diameter. With the intense winds in these areas passing 100 miles per hour, significant damage is caused to anything caught in the chaos, due to the speed with which a microburst can manifest and end, and the small area affected by it. It is probable that they occur more regularly than we are aware. Any ship or plane caught in the storm would almost certainly be lost, with either little or no evidence left of its passing, or the remains being moved to a different and unrelated area as the storm travels. It has been claimed that the number of vehicles lost with no viable explanation within the boundaries of the Great Triangle may run into the hundreds, with thousands of souls vanishing along with them. in some cases, the wreckage of these missing craft has eventually been found, minus the bodies of those who traveled in them. For a large percentage of these disappearances, the murderous weather conditions found in the Great Lakes will most likely have been the culprit. The bulk of these incidents has taken place during stormy weather, and in reality, the sunken vessels will eventually be located, and the mysteries which have surrounded their loss will ultimately be solved, and yet, the nature of some of these occurrences simply defies conventional explanation. Much like the previous stories we have examined from the region, there appears to be something intangible and inexplicable associated with these vast bodies of water, something harsh and unforgiving, and in some cases, murderous. We hope that as technology continues to evolve over time, the men and women who have nobly devoted their time to searching the beds of the Great Lakes will be able to answer the questions which remain unanswered, and that the families of the missing can finally obtain the closure they seek.